The first thing you learn working in an emergency room is that nothing is ever as urgent as it feels. That's not me being cold. That's survival. People come through those sliding doors at 2 in the morning, certain the world is ending, and most of the time it isn't. Most of the time it's a panic attack that feels like a heart attack, or a kid who swallowed a battery, or a drunk who went down off a curb and split his scalp open, and scalp wounds bleed like the end of the world even when they're nothing. You learn to slow your own pulse down so you can think. You learn that panic is contagious, and your first job, before anything else, is to not catch it. I'd been doing it 11 years. Overnight, St. Albans Regional, my post the security desk wedged between triage and the ambulance bay, camera bank built into the wall behind me. 22 monitors. Everybody called that corner the cage, because of the wire mesh they'd bolted over the equipment after a guy high on something tried to rip a monitor off the wall in '09. 22 screens, 4 camera banks, 1 chair with a lumbar support that gave out years ago, and me. I knew that hospital better than the administrators who ran it. I knew which fire door swelled and stuck in the humidity. I knew camera 9 had a 2-second lag. I knew the sound the ambulance bay doors made when a rig came in hot versus when it came in slow. 11 years. You stop watching the screens and start reading them. The way you read a face across a triage desk and know before they open their mouth whether they're a level 2 or a waste of a wristband. The footage never lied. Everything else in that building could be wrong. Charts transcribed wrong. Patients lying about how much they drank. Families swearing their father wasn't left waiting when the timestamp says he was. Memory in an ER is garbage. I mean that clinically. I watched it be garbage every single night, but the cameras recorded what was in front of them. No opinion, no fatigue. The footage doesn't lie. It started with a file that was saved before it happened. Our system archived automatically motion trigger, incident flag, or a manual save if I saw something worth keeping. Every clip stamped with a file name. Camera ID, date, time to the second. That Tuesday, 3:14 in the morning, I flagged a clip. 2 guys in the waiting room shoving each other over a phone charger. One had unplugged the other's phone to plug in his own, and in an ER waiting room at 3 a.m. That's a capital offense. I went out, got between them, did the calm voice, walked one of them to the far chairs. Nothing, a Tuesday. I came back to save the footage and the clip was already there. Already saved. Same camera, same 3:14. Except the date on the file was Wednesday. The next day, a wrong date on a file. That's an IT ticket, not a horror story. I laughed. Clock drift. I renamed it, filed my report, forgot about it. I forgot about it for exactly 1 day. Wednesday night, 3:14 in the morning, the same 2 men started shoving each other over the same charger. I stood at the edge of the waiting room and my mouth went dry. I checked. Maybe I'd mixed up the night shifts blur. Maybe they were regulars. I pulled the logs. My report from Tuesday was gone. Only one existed dated Wednesday. As if Tuesday's fight had never been logged. I sat down. The chair creaked. And I told myself, in the exact voice I use on a shaking man, there is a normal explanation for this. The next night I came in early, opened the archive and scrolled forward. Files stamped with times that hadn't happened yet. 11:40 p.m., 1:20 a.m., 2:55, a shift I hadn't worked. I opened the 1:20 file. Ambulance bay, camera 3. A rig pulls in slow, no lights. You learn to read that instantly slow with no lights means they've stopped hurrying, and they only stop hurrying for one reason. The medics bring a stretcher out. Older man, gray windbreaker, 1 shoe gone. They're not working him, they're just moving him. And in the corner of the frame, standing by the doors where I always stand, holding the door the way I always hold it, is me. I closed the laptop hard enough to crack the bezel. My whole life was built on one idea: the footage doesn't lie. And if the footage was showing me something that hadn't happened, then either the footage was broken or the world was. I decided the footage was wrong. I was going to make 1:20 not happen. At 1:20 a.m. I stood in the ambulance bay with my arms crossed. Nothing came. 1:25, 1:30. I felt relief so clean it made the backs of my knees weak. At 1:52, a rig pulled in. No lights. Slow. Older man. Grey windbreaker. One shoe. And I was by the door because where else would I be? I wrote down 32-minute discrepancy, like it meant something. Like I was still a man with a method. I went to my supervisor, told him the archive was corrupting timestamps. He said he'd open a ticket. Then he asked if I was sleeping okay and held my eyes a second too long. I know that second. I've used it on other people. IT came. 3 hours on the server. Nothing, no drift, no corruption. And when I pulled up the folder, every clip was stamped correctly. The windbreaker file said 1:52, not 1:20. My note, 32-minute discrepancy, sat next to a file with no discrepancy at all. One of the IT kids looked at my note, then at me, with an expression I recognized because it's the one I use on people I've decided might be a danger to themselves. Now, it wasn't the footage. It was the record of the footage. My own handwriting describing something the evidence said had never existed. And I could not tell whether the files had changed or whether I had. One answer meant the world was broken. The other meant I was. The world had 4 witnesses and a clean diagnostic. I had me. A nurse named Barty grabbed me during a double trauma and said, "Thank God you caught that elopement last night, the confused one in the parking garage." I had no memory of it. 2 nights later, a confused patient made it to the parking garage. I caught him. Barty thanked me word for word. After that, the order of things started to slip. I'd tell Delgado, but I haven't told you about Delgado yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a joke. I don't know what ahead means anymore. I bought a cheap camcorder, the kind that takes tape, because tape felt harder to rewrite than a file. I filmed the monitors filming the world. Footage of footage, I know how that sounds. But inside the logic I was living in, it made sense. If the archive could rewrite itself, I needed something in my pocket the system couldn't touch. The tapes were just tapes. Then I watched one back and heard myself say a name I didn't know. On the tape, I'm at the desk, and I lean toward the intercom and say, "Bay's clear, Delgado. Bring him around." Calm. Routine. We didn't have a Delgado. Not on any shift. Not in the building. 2 days later, my supervisor walked a new hire through. The kid stuck out his hand. "This is Delgado. Nights, starting next week." The tape had been in my pocket the whole time. You need to know Delgado for the end to cost you what it cost me. 26. Too gentle for the job, which I told him, and he took it as a compliment, which is exactly why it was true. Daughter named Mia, 4. Asthma bad enough he'd memorized the pediatric ER before he ever worked a shift in ours. He took nights because the overnight differential was the difference between a lease in a better district and staying put. He showed me Mia in a dinosaur raincoat his second shift. He kept one of her rescue inhalers in his locker because, he said, if he ever needed to know what it felt like to not breathe, he wanted it close. He thought I was his mentor. He told me everything. Mia, the lease, the fight with his wife, the apology after, and half of what he told me I'd already heard on a tape before his mouth formed the words. After that, things came apart in a specific way. I'd tell Delgado to check the bay. I could hear a rig backing in, the beeping, the diesel, and he'd come back and say the bay was empty. Had been empty for an hour, but I'd been certain. Not guessing. Certain, the way you're certain your hand is your hand, and the certainty didn't dissolve when it turned out wrong. It stayed, warm and whole, aimed at nothing, a key with no door. It started happening all the time. Past and future flattened out into one temperature, and I kept walking on it because I couldn't feel the edges anymore. My badge stopped working on the 3rd floor. The access log said I'd never had clearance. A charge nurse called me by the wrong name. My locker, same locker, 11 years, dent in the door. My key opened it and someone else's jacket was inside, like it had always been theirs. Barty passed me in the hall. I said, "Hey." She gave me the smile you give a stranger and kept walking. I was thinning out. Then a second grey windbreaker. Different man, different night, same slow rig, no lights. And I knew on a tape in my pocket, 3 days old, what I was about to say. On that tape, after they bring the stretcher in, I turn to Delgado and say, "Go home, kid. Go home right now." Sharp. The only time in any recording I ever sounded scared. So I said it. "Go home, kid." He laughed. Said his shift wasn't over for 4 hours. I said it again. He stopped laughing. He gave me the look, the IT kid's look, the nurse's look, the whole world's look by then. "You okay, man?" He didn't go home. Of course he didn't. You've got a lease riding on the differential and a daughter in a dinosaur raincoat and you stay. The tape had never shown him leaving. It only ever showed what was going to happen. Never what could. The tape started going wrong in a new way. I'd film a full shift and play it back and find gaps, long stretches where my chair was empty. Not cut. Empty. The monitors on, the ER grinding behind them, my chair vacant for hours on nights I hadn't left the desk. The last tape, the desk, the empty chair. Delgado comes into frame and says, to the empty room, "They're asking for the overnight guy. Nobody's seen him in a couple days." He lifts his radio and says a name and it isn't mine. He says it the way you read a name off a roster. Careful, sounding it out. The log on the desk is open to a page in handwriting that isn't mine. I looked down at my own log. The handwriting was already starting to not look like mine, or had never looked like mine. I looked at my hand on the pen and could not have sworn under oath it was the same hand that filled those pages. I found Delgado in the break room. I said Mia's name, and the school district, and the asthma, and the inhaler, and the fight about the lease, and the apology after all of it, fast, everything I had. "I know you. I've been here the whole time. I trained you. I'm real." He backed up, slow, both hands a little raised. "Man, I never told you any of that." He hadn't. Not yet. Every word had come from a tape. In the world where things had actually happened, I'd never heard any of it from him. His radio crackled. A code, 2nd floor, pediatric. His face changed and he was gone down the hall at a dead run, because that's Mia's floor, and a man like Delgado runs toward the small lungs every time? I never told you any of that. I pulled every tape, pocket, bag, all of it, and fed them into the machine. Everyone was static, gray, patient, like the camcorder had decided there was nothing worth recording. Everyone except the last. The desk, the empty chair, Delgado saying a name that isn't mine, and behind him, in the hallway, just for a frame, a man in a gray windbreaker. One shoe, standing still. I called HR, gave my name. The woman was kind. She looked me up, and there was no record of me. 11 years, no badge, no file, no incident reports, no locker. She asked whether I might have worked at a different location. I recognized every note in her voice, because it was mine, the exact voice, the calm one, the one that walks people gently toward the curb. I did find one thing. It took weeks, and it kept sliding away every time I got close. An incident report from a night I don't remember. A security officer, name not mine, walked a confused elderly male back from the parking garage. Gray windbreaker, one shoe. The report notes the patient kept insisting he wasn't lost, that he was early, that he'd just come in a little ahead of when he was supposed to. There is a man on the overnight shift at St. Albus right now. I can't hold on to his name. He sits at the desk, wire mesh at his back, 22 monitors, one chair with a dead lumbar support. He reads the screens the way you read a face. He believes the footage doesn't lie.